Hi, my name is Jim Heath, and I have cancer. I have myelodysplastic syndrome. My journey to this place has been long and difficult, and I've decided to go ahead and do a YouTube video about it in hopes that it might help others. I do YouTube videos about amateur radio, hence the shirt and the radio equipment. And so all of my videos have been really about helping. And this is outside the realm of amateur radio in a way, but I hope that it helps one person or more. And that is, this has been a very difficult, long journey to diagnosis, which was arrived at about a year ago. And what I want to discuss is the things that happened to me, and if I had to do them over again, what I would change. And maybe you can take some advice from that. Maybe it will be helpful, maybe it won't. The decision is yours. The journey begins about 1960 when the school nurse called my family and said, "There's something wrong with this kid." And we ended up going to the family doctor, and the doctor did some blood work, and it was determined that I had thyroid disease, and that it was overactive, and that I had a goiter. I was taken to UCLA many, many times, kind of an oddity, because they couldn't quite figure out where a kid in Burbank, California would have gotten radiation or something to cause a goiter. I think I now know, and you don't have to look very far north of the San Fernando Valley to figure that out. The thyroid gland was treated with yet more radiation, with what's known as an ablation, to kill off part of the thyroid gland. Fast forward many, many years. I'm 73 now. I was born in 1949. Diagnosis of the goiter was in 1960. The nuclear reactor that melted down in my area was 1959, I think. And I think there was more than one meltdown. Not certain of that. Not certain of the information that I have. So in beginning about 2015, roughly 7 years ago, I had my wife drive me to the emergency room more than one time. And we went to another emergency room in the area because we weren't getting much of an answer from the hospital where I had worked many years before as an accounting supervisor. I continued to have problems breathing, tachycardia where my heart would just race. So I bought from Amazon a pulse oximeter. In fact, I think I bought two, and put it on my finger, and one of them had an alarm built into it. November 2nd, 2016, I woke up in my radio room. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I had either passed out or fallen asleep. I was at the desk and tried to get up to go to the bathroom. Couldn't get up, couldn't walk. The pulse oximeter, I put it on my finger. It showed a pulse rate of 155 and oxygen level of about 73. So with that, we called 911. I was taken code 3 to the hospital, to the emergency room. I was lucky in that this time the doctor who treated me was the head of the emergency room and very skilled. And he did a test that had not been done before, and that was something called a D-dimer. The D-dimer showed that I had the highest score they had ever seen in that hospital by many times. I was full of emboli. I was having difficulty breathing. A scan of my lungs showed that I was in deep trouble. Lovenox was applied to break up the clots. I was in there for a week. Was kind of an oddity again, sort of like my time at UCLA, where the doctors were coming behind me and palpating my thyroid gland like they were choking me. They'd reach around and feel it because it was weird. How did this kid get this? It was the same thing in Sierra Nevada. They actually wrote it on the whiteboard in big letters, 12,218. Normal score might be a couple of hundred, might be zero. By a couple of hundred, I mean at a couple of hundred, from what I understand, there's a problem. At 12,000, you may not survive. Did survive that, was sent home with an oxygen machine, a walker, because of other reasons, and basically having to use the oxygen machine much of the time at night. So we tried to figure out what caused it. My family doctor said that the emboli was caused by a deep vein thrombosis, that I'd leaned up against something, that I bumped my leg. We knew that was wrong because it had happened over and over and over again, and it didn't make sense that my D-dimer score would be so high or that both of my lungs would be filled with blood clots. To me, it didn't make sense. It should not have made sense to him. With that, we went to UC Davis for a couple of years, all kinds of tests, a bunch of misdiagnoses, a bunch of incorrect diagnoses, which is part of the reason for this video. Doctors were saying different things. One said I had an aneurysm, an aortic aneurysm. And when we asked him about it, he said, well, Mr. Heath, you will be dead before you hit the floor. That's a quote. And I always have my wife with me in the room so that she can take notes and listen to what's going on, because she's the calmer person in the room. Eventually, we went to another doctor who I liked a lot. It was a doctor that we would pay a monthly fee to see. It was about $1,000 a month. And we kept getting the same response to blood tests, which was one of the keys. And he would say, maybe that's just the way you are. Maybe your low red blood count is just the way you are. And other doctors had told me that maybe that's it. That's just the way you are. You're very low red blood count and your low white count. Maybe that's just the way you're built. That turned out not to be true. So we sold the house we'd been in for 38 years and moved to Rockland, California to get into Kaiser. Money was going out at a huge rate, and we had to cut that back. So we went to Kaiser. I had had gallbladder problems, and it came up all the time, and had a couple of episodes of really bad pain, and met with a surgeon. Surgeon looked at my blood test and said something to the effect that he was not going to do the surgery because he was concerned about the blood work, that something wasn't right. Didn't make sense. And so I was sent to an oncologist who agreed, and a bone marrow aspiration was done where they take a hollow core drill into the bone, and let me tell you, that hurt worse than anything I'd ever had done. And they sucked out bone marrow, sent it to Utah, where it was examined, and the diagnosis was myelodysplastic syndrome, cancer 3 ways, and other issues, low white count, neutropenia, and they had trouble doing the bone marrow aspiration because of the very severe osteoporosis. And oh, by the way, diastolic heart failure, and you've lost 25% of your lung capacity. So since that time, I did get a different cancer doctor, because the first one, his attitude was, let's just wait and see. And that made no sense to me. That we need to figure out what's going on. Part of what I teach in YouTube videos is fixing something or connecting or making it work, and his idea for figuring out something didn't make sense, so I literally fired him. Went to another doctor who was more aggressive in the tests. Now here's where things get interesting. I started researching the test results. I did spreadsheets. I read stuff from various places like the Mayo Clinic, and determined that more tests needed to be done. and she agreed. And I also had help from some of my ham radio buddies who are doctors in other countries. And so I pressed her for more tests and more tests and more tests. And it turns out that there is other things that are wrong, and we're still figuring out one of those things. My red blood cells, it's sort of like sickle cell anemia, but it may be autoimmune hemolytic anemia. At least that's my thought at this point. To what extent and what can we do about it? We may be able to come to a decision in the next couple of weeks. Point being, each time I went to the emergency room, the doctor in Grass Valley, the ER doc, would say, it's PTSD, it's nothing, go home. Until I was taking code 3, then it was something. Went to UC Davis, spent 2 years going to doctors there, and it was a hell of a drive. My wife had to drive me because at that point I couldn't drive. And even there, it was missed over and over and over again, and it should not have been. In my view, it should not have been. With all the doctors we saw, yeah, MDS, myelodysplastic syndrome, is rare. It's only diagnosed about 30 times a day at best, but still. So what's my point? Challenge your doctor. If you don't like what the doctor's telling you, or if you think his attitude is, and he sits across from the room from you and never touches you, or his bedside manner is lousy, fire him and get a different doctor. Even if you're in a big system, get a different doctor. Ask somebody who a good doctor is. Don't take no for an answer. Don't take yes for an answer. Always challenge that doctor. If you go in there and say, hey, I saw this on the blood test, does that mean X? You may be wrong. You may not have any idea, but ask. Do some reading. Do some research. Be your own advocate. That doctor is not going to advocate for you. He may be required, he or she, in my case I've got a lady doctor, woman doctor, she will spend time with me if needed. She'll spend whatever time is needed, but she is the exception. Most of the doctors, they've got 15 or 20 minutes, 15 minutes if it's a cold, 20 minutes if you got cancer. And they're on to the next one because they have to turn patients. And then when you contact that doctor, you may have 2,000 or 3,000 patients. So you want that guy to know you, even if you have to do something like raise your hand or get angry with him. But get his attention. And if that isn't good enough, get somebody else. Challenge your doctor. Don't take his diagnosis as fact. Challenge it. Ask other doctors. Ask friends. Because time slips by very carefully. In my case, MDS, from time that it begins in some reports, has 6 years. I probably have had it since 2015. I'm now 7 years into it. For those who have severe cases, it can be months, 4 months for very severe, because it converts to leukemia. In fact, MDS is sometimes called pre-leukemia. I hope this helps you. If it does and you want to buy a cup of coffee for me, I'll put the thing up on the screen. If you have a comment, post that below. If you've had some experience, post that because that may help someone. I'm not going to respond to comments. I just don't have the energy to do it right now. I'm getting injections every 2 weeks, which sort of sap my strength. And I do other YouTube videos. So if you have a comment or an experience, post that below. Let us know what's happened to you. It may help someone else. If you think that what I've said here is not good advice, say that. If you think it's good advice, say that, please. Comments are all good, either side. We live in a time where people don't want to get along. You're either red or you're blue or you're this or you're that. I'm so sick of that. We need to come together and help each other. I have cancer. I have myelodysplastic syndrome. I have severe osteoporosis. I have diastolic heart failure. I have a heart murmur. I've lost 25% of my lung capacity. Um, I've got a goiter, you name it, I seem to have it. I'm Jim Heath in Rockland, California, saying thank you for watching. And if things come up, I may do a subsequent YouTube video. Give me a thumbs up. This is going to be in my ham radio category because I don't have another place to put it, but maybe that'll branch out later on. Again, thanks for watching.